Dana would want me, our producer would want me to say again, please like, subscribe, share, leave a review, because you've heard me say that spiel before. So, do we want to make sure that everyone can hear each other talking? Does this feel good? Feels like a good. Nice. We should have done this earlier. You know.
The next time, next week.
Next week, yeah. We also wonder if this would be the better setup for the speaker too, as well.
I prefer this. It just seems more intimate. You can hear everyone. It's easier to participate. I prefer the service.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, again, everybody, this is Alex Casas, and Alex connected us with several of our facilitators and their live stream guests. So we were really glad that you wanted to connect with us. I guess I'm gonna just let you tell us about all the stuff that you do. So thank you again for being here. We're very excited to have you. You good, Deanna? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you all for being here. This isn't an easy subject to talk about. And so I just want to really applaud you all for being here and taking that first step in having this conversation and being open to what options and choices that you have. I started doing this work about, going on like 13, 14 years that I've been working in end-of-life and funeral care. I'm an educator, I'm an end-of-life doula. I also train local doulas here in town. I started my own company kind of as a goal to really just help individuals and families know that they have options, know that they have choices, and really feel empowered and informed with making these personal decisions that we're all going to face eventually. So that's kind of what started my journey. I've always kind of just been ready to help where I'm needed. During the COVID pandemic, I actually pivoted and helped design and hand build the mobile morgues that we had here in Central Texas. They were actually preferred over the FEMA trailers. And I only say that because that's just how I feel about our industry. It's really about jumping in and helping where you are needed. Without any kind of expectation or any other reason than just doing what's right and helping others make decisions that are right for them. And so, yeah, I just want to say thank you guys. And I hope that a lot of this just really opens you up to the conversation. So feel free to ask any questions. This is the best time, especially if you've had questions about this, but maybe not felt so comfortable asking or knowing what to ask. This is a perfectly safe place, and I encourage you to ask all and any questions that come up. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to really kind of focus in on the conversation that we've been having through kicking the bucket. And I think a lot of it stems with just how difficult it is to have these type of conversations. It's not something that we all gather for Thanksgiving and, wow, we're all here. This is the perfect time to tell everyone what I have planned for my advanced directives and what it is that I want done and not done. Well, it doesn't really seem like the appropriate time, right? We save it. Oh, next time we're all together, then we'll talk about it. And unfortunately, we tend to put it off so long that we don't think about these things or have time to make these decisions when we're still able to make them for ourselves. And rather, we wait until the last minute when something big happens. When a diagnosis happens, when somebody gets ill, and then all of a sudden we're forced to think about it and make these decisions from a place of emotion and stress. And we're seeing it through the characters, right? As they're progressing, they want to have this conversation, but they don't know how or when. When is it appropriate? And a lot of this goes back to what our good friend Sabiha always says, misguided love. We're doing a lot of this because we love our families so much and we don't want to hurt them. we don't want to ruin Thanksgiving by bringing up our advanced directives and what we want done. So instead we wait and we hold on to it until there's the perfect time. But that perfect time doesn't always come. And so this journey has been really interesting to see because it brings it to light of how we're all going to go through something similar, whether it's caring for somebody we love or having to face the reality that we're all going to die eventually. And everyone we know is going to die. And that's hard. But we can talk about it and we can prepare as best we can by really having these conversations. And so something Andi and I were saying was, what is the purpose of this? It's exactly that. It's to open the door to have these difficult conversations and talk about what it is we want and don't want. Because that is so personal. What you want might be different from what you want. And maybe, right? We just spoken. You guys might have similar plans. You guys might need to be each other's medical power of attorneys. And that's okay, right? But we don't know what we don't know until we start talking about it. Until we start thinking about, well, what is most important to me? Maybe, we think about these things, and on average, a funeral, just so you know, on average, it costs about $10,000. That's crazy. But you don't have to pay $10,000. If you're planning in advance and I say planning, not prepaying. Let me be very specific about that. I am very much for pre-planning, not for prepaying. And we can talk about that at a whole other time. But for now, we're going to focus on that planning portion. And so the more we know, we can start figuring out, okay, well, maybe I don't need to spend $10,000 on a funeral. Maybe I want that $10,000 to go to my granddaughter's college tuition. Maybe I want that $10,000 to pay off any debt so my family doesn't have to worry about it. You have options. But you're not going to know what options you have until you begin that conversation and start really also internally thinking about what's most important to you. A lot of currently the trending new way of disposition, which is the way we die, what we do with our bodies after we die. The first that's always been has been cremation. That's what most people choose, is cremation. The second has always been traditional burial, what we're all familiar with. Now, in trending times, the new second most chosen disposition is natural burial. And we're seeing a rise in this because families are now taking control and making decisions to have more family-directed services, where you get to decide what it is you want and save money while you're doing it. And so we're seeing this become a more popular option. We're also seeing direct cremation become a popular option because guess what? In Austin, Texas, you can have a direct cremation for as low as $695. You also can have the exact same service for $4,000.
Is there a
I'll take
difference?
the first.
Yeah, take the first one, yeah.
I would too.
Yeah. Is there a difference between direct cremation and cremation?
Absolutely. So let's talk about that a little bit, right?
Okay.
Direct cremation is essentially you die, they pick you up, they take you back into their care, the funeral home. And there is a legal law where there is a 48-hour period where paperwork has to be submitted and the cremation rights and all of that has to be taken care of. So there is that little bit of a waiting period where the body is typically kept in refrigeration if you choose to not be embalmed, because you have the choice of choosing to not be embalmed, especially for a direct cremation where you're essentially going from you're dead, you've been picked up, you're in refrigeration, and then you're going straight into the crematory retort to be cremated. That's a direct cremation. There's no family viewing. You can choose to have a memorial after with the cremated remains present or not. But essentially, you're not going through and having a viewing and having a whole service at the funeral. That's a direct cremation. The family still has the choice of spending 30 minutes with their loved one typically before that happens, not always. That's also important too, that if you're really interested in having that time with your loved one, death is not an emergency. Once somebody dies, especially if they've died under hospice care, you don't have an emergency where you need to call the funeral home right away. You can have that moment to just pause, to be with your loved one, to perform a ritual, whether it's bathing or dressing them or preparing them to get picked up by the funeral home. You have that time. And so if you're choosing direct cremation, you can still have that time with your loved one. You call the funeral home when you're ready. They come pick up your loved one. They let you know when the cremation will take place, and it's all done for $695 or $4,000, depending on how much you know. Now, I will say for Central Texas, a really good resource is the Funeral Consumers Alliance of Central Texas. That is FCACTX.org. There you can actually find a price list of all of the funeral homes in our area, and you can actually compare what the prices are. And that's where you'll be able to see, oh, this funeral home offers $4,000 for a direct cremation. This one offers it for $600. Again, the more you know. But how do we know more if we're not having these conversations? And so I just want to pause there because I have so much information that I'd love to share with you, but I want to know what questions you have. Is there something that really comes to mind about this journey that you're interested, curious about, scared about, or just want some clarity?
I think it's hard to even know where to begin. So my parents said, okay, we're going to try to figure out how to take care of this so you don't have to take care of it. And they might have been taken, I guess, by, like the one-stop shop. We'll do everything. If you're traveling, we'll take care of the body and get it back to the country. So when you don't know, so you don't even know what to ask. It's kind of like, yeah.
I think because it's like, you can't go get all the information about everything that exists on any subject, so you start with, I think, having your own vision of what's important to you before, and then you see, does that exist? So it's like, describing how you were saying, that's how we had it for my mom. And, we didn't know if it existed, but we know that's what we wanted.
Yeah.
And then when you know what you want, you can say, how do I make that happen? But rather than what are all my options, and then figuring out what you want from the options. First figure out what you want, and then go seek out how do I make that happen. I think it takes that overwhelming feeling away. So I think it's, and then I think that starts with like what do you value?
Absolutely. I think that's a really, really important point, right? And I think a lot of it also is we don't know what death looks like anymore. We used to take care of our elders in our homes. We were familiar with what the process of dying looked like. And now we're so foreign to it. We are sending our parents to the nursing home, to the retirement home. We're moving further away from our families. And so it's becoming more foreign as to what do we do? How do we do it? What is important to me? And so we're not familiar with it. We don't know what to ask until something suddenly happens to us or to someone we know that maybe inspires us to then think, well, what would I want in that situation? What is most important?
So after choosing a different option, I've donated my body to research. They will, once they get to chopping it up, they will cremate and send it back to whoever you want to send it to.
Yep.
So after you let us know that you're gone or whatever, we don't do that, but and then you have the time until they can get to you and just take you away.
Yeah, well, when it comes to donation, I always, Correct.
Yeah.
That's usually the selling point for most people, right? Is all expenses are usually covered and it's usually a cremation. And so you have to be okay with that. Now, what I always tell everybody who chooses that as an option is to have a backup plan. Because you don't know what situation you're going to die of. Let's suppose right now you're in great health. Absolutely, we want to take your body for research. You're a perfect candidate. Well, what happens if at the time of death, you're in a car accident and all of a sudden your body no longer is eligible? Now we have to think of a backup plan. So it's just something to consider and to then also just have in mind, well, if it doesn't work out, here's my backup plan. Just so that way you, again, have that option. Another great option for body donation is at the forensic farm, which is here. And that is a different way of donating your body, but rather than for research, you're donating it for forensic research. And there you actually don't receive any cremated remains back because they keep your bones cataloged forever. You can actually go and visit with your loved one if they have been donated there. Yeah. You can even choose to have their bones, their skeletal bones put together as them, because their research students will actually do that. And so you have options, right? But always have a backup if you are a donor, because you never know. And same thing with organ donation. It's really important to know that in order to be an organ donor, you have to die within feet of a ventilator. We got to keep that body working so that those organs stay working. So if you're an organ donor, let's hope you're dying in the hospital. If you're under hospice care, you're probably not going to qualify to be an organ donor, but you can still qualify to donate your eyes, your skin, your bone. There's other options. Yes.
Interesting subject. It's nice that we are talking right now about what we will like. But I'm going to ask you something. How, in my case, my mother is 98 years old. She's strong. She had 3 surgeries the past 3 years. And she's at home with my sisters and brothers, okay? That's just in South America. But the thing is this. I think it's the time for us as a siblings to talk about this. No, I know that she wants relation, but I think for us, it's important for us to talk about the subject. So how it will be a good way to open that subject to the siblings?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of really good resources too to help you with the conversation. The conversationproject.org is a nonprofit who actually focuses on assisting with these difficult conversations. So that's a good resource to start. Another way to start is really just gathering your siblings and saying, you know, mom is 98 years old. We're going to have to talk about this subject now or when it happens. Let's talk about it now so we can make a plan, so we can prepare as much as we can so that we're ready for that. And when the time comes, our focus can be on mom, on taking our time with our loved one, instead of who do we need to call? Did we call the funeral? What decision do we need to make? It all becomes this rush and urgency and impulsive nature of what do we need to get done, where we don't have enough time to stop and be with our loved ones. And that's where you need to also have that conversation with your siblings and remind them the benefits of having the conversation, the benefits of what is important and how are we going to accomplish that. Let's start with a plan. We know in everyday life, it's always better to have some kind of a plan and preparation than having to go in it without anything at all. Makes it a little bit harder. I also have a good resource that I'm happy to provide all of you for you to take home. My information's on there, so you can email me if you want more copies or more information. I'm happy to help however. But that way you can start having the conversation. One of the resources is a health values worksheet, and it kind of just walks you through what is most important to you. And so you can do that for yourself, but you can also do that for your loved one. So what is most important to mom? Well, we know mom was really adamant that she wanted to have last rites. Okay, that's going to be something that we want to make sure we do. And so it's just walking you through to help you decide what is most important to me and what do I need to help start preparing for. I think I saw a question. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so with my experience with losing my sister last year, she did not want to, she was dying of ovarian cancer. She was in hospice care just before she left. She did do not resuscitate. However, she signed the document the day she passed, not knowing she's gonna pass that day. And so the hospice care did not have the document to me. So when they came, when she passed and they came, they're gonna resuscitate her. So only because we have the same PCP and I was able to get a hold of him and say, I know we had an advance directive on file with him, they didn't do it. So there's a lot of this paperwork trail
Yes,
that we need to be more aware
yes.
of, because bringing her back would have been horrible for her. Second thing is, she wanted cremation. She died intestate, because again, the day she died, because he had it so suddenly. Her son was on his way in town, my nephew, for her to sign her will, but she didn't sign it in time. So her boys took over, her two boys, were grown men, and did all the things they wanted that she didn't want. So they had a viewing, they had embalming. She was in refrigeration for 2 months. It was just so not what she wanted.
Right.
So and then I have one more point after this, but the thing is, we need to make sure that we know whatever our wishes are, where do we keep that
Yes.
paperwork?
Yes.
So it gets honored,
Yeah.
because hers was not. And the third question that was in the back of my mind that really was concerning is, you mentioned we want to have some time. I was the only one there with her to be able to say goodbye. I kind of kissed her for everybody.
Yeah.
But then emergency came and they rushed her out. It was the idea like, I don't know, body fluids are gonna change or what it is. So there wasn't that actual
Yeah.
quality time. It was like, they gave me like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And her son was on his way. He got there an hour late. And it was like, we didn't really, were given the option to stay with her. And so I'm wondering, how do you set that up so that that is something that can be honored?
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing, and I sympathize with your situation, and I wish that it was more uncommon. But unfortunately, that is the reality of a lot of situations. The best way to prevent these things from happening is completing your advanced directives. The advanced directives that I always recommend completing are the Texas legal directives. You can also find those under fcactx.org.
Say that again.
F as in Frank, C as in cat, A as in apple, C as in cat, T as in Texas, X as in xylophone.org. So at Funeral Consumers Alliance of Central Texas.org, essentially. On there is a tab that says directives. You go onto that directives tab and you can print out the Texas legal directives and have them completed. Now, that's not enough. We complete them, we have them notarized or witnessed, and then we need to tell everybody who is going to be our voice if we are unable to speak for ourselves. So assigning a medical power of attorney. Let's suppose your sister had assigned you as her medical power of attorney rather than the next of kin, which would have been her husband or her children. Then you would have the legal right to make decisions for her if she is unable to speak for herself, but she still has that chance of living, right? Once somebody dies, the medical power of attorneys no longer valid. And so that's also why there is a directive for disposition. That is where you decide what it is you want, whether it's cremation or burial. And there's another directive that you can complete, which can appoint somebody as the individual who will make those decisions for you after you die. All of those directives can be found on that website. Make sure you complete them, make copies for all of the people that will be speaking for you. Make sure that you're having conversations. Sometimes what I even do is gather everybody on a Zoom call, record it, and we all have the conversation. We go through everything it is that I want and don't want, and I share that video with everyone. So if there's any question, we can refer back to it. My other suggestion for that is too, if you have your directives completed, I like to put them in a bright red folder. See, just like this one, a bright red folder. And I like to put it on the back of the headboard. You can put it on the refrigerator. Now it makes it difficult if somebody's in the hospital, right? As the advocate, which is what you want to have, is a really good advocate. The pit bull of your family. Doesn't have to be your child or your spouse. It has to be the person who is willing to advocate for you when you need it most. So in this situation, perhaps that individual was you versus her children. The next thing I want to touch on is you did mention because she was in a hospital setting, it becomes a different format where, well, now we need the bed flipped over because we need somebody else to get on that bed. And so now the rush begins.
It was hospice.
And she was on hospice. Oh, and she was at home. So see, there shouldn't have been a rush. And you should have been given enough time because there is no emergency, guys. The body doesn't just immediately start to decompose. It doesn't work that way. There's even options to where we've had families who choose home wakes or even just small portions of a home funeral where the individual was refrigerated for 2 weeks and then was taken back to the brother's house where the friends and family bathed her, shrouded her, and then the funeral home came to pick her up and take her to the cemetery. So you have options, but a lot of it requires an advocate and that pit bull to speak for you and fight for you. And that's also why we're having the conversations with the people we know are going to be those advocates and giving them a copy of their paperwork and really just covering checking off all of our boxes.
So how do wills fit into all of this?
Wills, that's a part of it too. So an advanced
Well,
directive,
So is a will legal?
a will is legal.
That's what I thought. The reason I was wondering.
Absolutely, a will is legal. It's another way of an advanced directive.
Yeah.
And so same
So-
thing, you want to make sure you give a copy to
Right.
everybody who's going to be able to speak for you or who has that right for you.
Right, okay. I mean, I thought that was true, but advanced directive is in a whole other vision, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Advanced directives really just breaks it down into your physician directive, your medical power of attorney. If you wanted to have a do not resuscitate form, which I do want to touch on because I think it's very interesting how language is really important in this conversation. And do not resuscitate sounds, do not resuscitate. You could do something, but don't do it. That language behind it just makes you feel awful to have to be the person to advocate for do not resuscitate. But what I want you to consider is that in most other states, it's not called do not resuscitate form. It's allow natural death. Doesn't that sound a lot nicer? I prefer that over do not resuscitate. So things to think about, right? As we're talking, living will versus an advanced directive. We just want to think about the language we're using and that we're really clarifying so that way there's nothing missed.
And in this situation, could she have said no to them coming, like in the emergency? Could she have said, no, this is too fast, you're taking her away, I need time with her, you need to stop and give me, do we have that power? say no.
Absolutely, and I'm in this situation, I'm assuming hospice was informed that she died or they were present. They have to
No,
be
they
the
were not.
ones.
Hospice was terrible. This is why we had problems. Hospice was way north in Austin during rush hour on a Friday. Said they'd be there in 3 hours after my sister passed. And this is when she was struggling.
Right.
And I said, well, I need help now. And they said, well, then you need to call 911. And that just got the local constable involved, who was a
Yeah.
lovely man. And I just tried to follow that lead. Hospice did not do what they were supposed to do.
And that's
And
unfortunate.
I had never used hospice before, so I wasn't sure what player I was supposed to.
Or what to expect.
You know.
Yeah, and that's another thing I want to mention here too, is if you are looking for hospice services, you have the right to fire hospice. You have the right, and you should be looking and comparing between different hospices to find the right one. And if they're not doing their job, fire them and find another. You have that right. But again, we just don't know what we don't know until we're forced to face that situation, and then we're trying to figure it out. And so that's another reason why I appreciate all of us being here, because it gives us that opportunity to start thinking about the things that we do have more control over, but we just need to be more vocal or advocate a little stronger.
And with hospice, how do you know that they're not doing things they're supposed to other than just gut?
That's,
Especially early on, and then when you figure it out, it's too late, because it's too late to change.
yeah, I agree with that. I think it's really difficult when you don't know what to expect. And I do agree that you have to kind of trust your gut instinct of, this doesn't feel right. That's also why we advocate for you interviewing at least 3 different hospices. Because you should be able to, again, decide which one aligns with my values. For example, there are some hospices that don't agree with voluntarily stop eating and drinking, which is a legal form of dying here in Texas and all states. We don't have medical aid in dying, but we do have the option of VSED, which is voluntarily stop eating and drinking. Now, if you wanted to go that route, you would want to find out if the hospice that you are going with supports it or is familiar with it. So again, just the more you know, and just also trust yourselves that you can be good advocates, and trust yourselves to know what feels right and what doesn't.
I think it's important. I mean, obviously it's all about planning. And I think to make it not overwhelming, think of planning as before, during, and then after. And so that before planning it can seem overwhelming. How am I going to know everything I don't know? And the before is like when you were talking about conversations with family. I'm one of 13 and we can't agree on pizza. And so when it came to decisions for parents, the before conversations we're not all going to agree. We're all going to have different needs, but we do have to be on the same page, and that is the same priority. And so when you can all get on the same page with that same priority, which is mom's wishes, that's it. I'm going to have my own needs and my own opinion,
Yes.
but as long as we're on the same page with that priority. And so, and then the during is why you have your advanced directives. What are we going to do during the crisis? And then it's the body disposition and the after, or your will. And so I just think it makes it easier when you can break it in before, during, and after. And that before piece, those conversations, it's really about how do I envision it going? And then you would say to hospice, I want to spend that time with my loved one. I don't want them to go away right away, or all other things you want. Having that conversation before you're in the during stage,
Yes.
you can't think of those things and you're just responding. Someone told you to call 911. Okay. I mean, you're just doing it. But if in the before stage, you have the opportunity to really think about how you envision it happening, and then asking, can you make that possible?
Yes.
What will you do? And then you're able to make those decisions. And so I think it's easier to break it into the before, during, and after.
Thank you.
So Alex, are you gonna be teaching the LLI class this fall?
Yes, I will. Yeah, we'll be doing that this fall. We do LLI class, which is open for seniors, which is
But only 50-year-olds, right?
50 and up. But it's really a class to really help educate you on what you should know before you go. And it's really, really incredible that we're able to do it through LLI, who is Lifetime Learning Institute. They have a bunch of really cool classes with all kinds of different interests, but that one is specific to end of life. And yes, and that will be this fall, and there's still time to sign up. I think it releases in August. So if you're interested, if you want to deep dive into all of these topics, I highly recommend you take the class because we go really deep into all of it. We walk you through the directives, and we hope that by the end of our class time together, you actually have your directives completed, because we do bring in a notary to have that all officialized as well.
You talked about direct cremation and no family viewing. So how do we know that the body is not going to be discarded like it has happened lately or suddenly before? Like, rotting and
Yeah.
finding the corpses. So that bothers me,
Yeah, absolutely. It's
even after I'm dead.
Yeah, it's been on the news a lot. I will say that I worked in the funeral industry for a very long time, and there are processes and procedures that are followed and should always be followed so that things like that don't happen. They should never happen.
So
The way that it is, the process that is followed is that there is an identification tag that is with you from beginning to end, including when you are in the cremation retort. That tag is flammable proof, so it stays with you and it goes with you even after. And so that is your identification number to ensure that it is who they say it is. But there is really strict processes to avoid that from happening. It's just been all over the news lately, so it's understandable why you would feel that way. But I will tell you to rest assured that, again, most of the processes are really strict and diligent, and there is that ID that goes with you from beginning to end that identifies you and only you.
So how come it happened?
And that's a whole conversation for a whole other time. If you want to talk about it after, we can talk.
Because it happened, I heard it not many times, but several times on the news or on the, and I said, how can that happen?
Yeah,
I mean, dishonest people for sure, but they were able to give some, I didn't call them, the box, and say, oh, here is, your grandmother, your mother.
yeah, it's been
Nobody knew anything for quite some time.
Yeah, it's been a lot on the news. I can't speak for them because I'm not
The
familiar
ashes,
with them.
that's the word.
The cremated remains.
So they
the
give the
ashes.
box with the ashes and say, oh, here she is.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Again, that shouldn't happen. And that ID card, that ID pin label, it kind of looks like dog tag. The ones that you see on your dogs to identify the rabies and everything like that, their ID. It looks like that, and that tag stays with you throughout. Typically, too, there's paperwork that gets authorized through each step of the process. So it's very rare that it happens. It's just been a lot on the news, so I'm not surprised we're hearing about it right now. But we can talk if you want to.
$600 service.
No, not them, actually. The people who were
$4,000.
the people who were in trouble were not charging $695. They were charging a lot more than that.
I just wanted
Very-
to follow up with your
Yeah.
question about how do I talk to my family, because when leading by example is very powerful. And so if you can come to your family with your directives and your wishes, and just say, I'd like to share what's important to me and what I want, and they can see how easy it was for you to go through everything and complete everything and communicate it, then it's a lot easier for them to go, oh, okay, well, gosh, I should do mine, and what does mom want? And so you leading by an example is a very powerful conversation starter to your loved ones. So you can get yourself in line and figure it out, then that would be a good way to go. too.
Especially for me, the most important thing is we kind of know what my mother wants. And I would like everybody to respect that.
Right.
Because it's her ruling. So that I go for that.
Yeah, use the words about yourself and that will help them see that.
I like to joke that kicking the bucket came about because I couldn't have the conversation. It's like, so that became the conversation, right? But it's funny how it started to become the conversation with my parents, but not necessarily the siblings.
Yeah.
And so I also joke that in some ways kicking the bucket is, or like all this stuff that we're learning is the stuff that Dolores and Howard should have had, that they should have known, or they should have had an opportunity to know, because like in this episode, maybe they could have maybe not gone to Schlitterbahn, maybe, maybe let's not go there. Maybe let's say, no, why don't we all just gather and have this conversation that we've been wanting to have?
There's no you are doing that.
Does Schlitterbahn know? I really wish that Schlitterbahn knew and would become a sponsor. Yeah.
But even that, like, it doesn't always have to be so serious the way we start the conversation. It could be as simple as, I listened to this really great podcast that you should listen to. And it brought up some good topics that I want to consider. Or my sisters and I started sending them songs, and I'm like, ooh, I want this one. When you bury me, make sure you're playing this song as I'm getting buried and lowered into the ground. And then it just evolved into like a never ending joke. And so now we're always like, ooh, what about this song for your funeral? So we joke about it. So it doesn't always have to be so serious. It could even be, I've had this I went to the library today and these crazy people were talking about death and dying. Let's talk about it, right? It could be as simple as that. And it's just really important to get it started.
Yeah.
And what I keep reminding myself of is that death and dying is part of living. It's just the end of it.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be this, if we talk about it, it's going to happen, right? It's the same thing with hospice. It is going to happen anyway, right? What's the current mortality rate in the United States? Do you guys know what it is? No? What's the current mortality rate in the United States?
100%.
100%. None of us are getting out of this alive. Yeah. We're all going.
Right.
And so that is part of it, right? And if we embrace it, then maybe we could live a little fuller. Then maybe we could focus on things that are really important to us, because we just never know. And it goes even to the conversation of hospice. We fear hospice, but hospice really has some wonderful benefits and really helps the individual and the caregivers and family involved. But you hear the word hospice and it's like, oh my gosh, they're immediately going to die. Well, not necessarily. Look at Jimmy Carter. He was on hospice for many years, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to die immediately, the way it doesn't mean that you're going to die tomorrow because we're having the conversation today.
It's such an ugly word,
Which is
hospital.
hospice. Yeah, it doesn't sound as nice, but they are wonderful.
Yeah.
Hospitality.
Hospitality.
Yeah.
No,
End
so,
of life welcome.
end of life. Maybe Texas will come up with a better. Yeah, nice. We're good at that. So, and like for Dolores and Howard, what, like, I don't know, I guess you can use them as a, what they did this. Is that something that you would do? You could, I guess, use it that way, like.
Yeah, absolutely. Or, right, I mean, their whole premise is that they're trying to protect their family. Because that's what we do. We want to protect our families and our loved ones. And then their daughter's doing the same thing. She wants to protect them. And everybody's trying to protect each other, but in the meantime, nobody's communicating, we're talking, and the situation is getting worse. And so I think this is a perfect example of what do you want and not want? And what does that look like for you? Goes back to what is most important to you.
And like Dolores and Howard are obviously in that before stage. And it's like, and that's that part about everyone's gonna have different needs and wants, but they have to be on the same page with that priority. And they're assuming so much of each other. And so until they have these conversations about, what is Dolores' priority or what is Howard's priority, they can focus on realizing that self-awareness, that it's not about, Tamika's need, or it's not about Jared's need. It's about what is Howard's need, what is Dolores, and they need to be able to communicate that.
Well, and when they do, imagine how much more supportive their circle becomes, because now they understand there's different needs that need to be met, that there's different ways to cope and to help through that. It just opens the door to so much more than, again, us trying to hold it in to protect our loved ones.
And it opens the door to the options and choices.
Yes,
When you know what your priority is,
yes.
they're assuming, if his priority is, I don't want to suffer and I don't want to be a burden to my children. So that's Howard's priority. And he's not sharing that priority. He's keeping it to himself, and he's assuming the only way to address that priority is to take my own life in my hands and to do it quickly, sooner than later. But he's just making that assumption. He's not, once you put that priority out there to everyone, then he could realize, what other options he can have to still, not suffer and not feel like a burden to his children.
And exploring that too. What does his quality of life look like versus his quantity of life? And how can he create a quality of life even during this last chapter of his?
Do families ever encounter family members who might have not be willing to listen, who are like, I don't care, I know what's best, and we need to do it this way, which perhaps Sonia and Jared might have been like, we have our idea of how it should go, and they're so old that they don't know, they aren't in their right mind anymore. They don't know what's best for them. And what do you do in that situation? So you're all nodding like, yes, that happens.
Yes,
You do. When you can't even get part of the family members to listen.
But you definitely wouldn't make them your power of attorney.
Exactly. Yeah, that's never.
Don't take the shoulder off.
Oh, don't make them just let her go. Yeah.
Howard was really comfortable saying, it's okay, Sonia, we don't fit. I mean, and that was okay. It's also okay to say, don't worry, Sonia, you don't have to make those decisions for me. Like, I want to make these decisions.
And most of the time it's coming from a fear that they have. And so they are fearful and concerned. So I've got to now take control of this. So it's addressing, what are your worries about this? Why do you feel like I need to do this? And everybody having that self-awareness to take a moment and explain what they're thinking and feeling about the situation.
And control is the main key, right? Everybody's fighting for control. And kind of, if you can kind of like flip the switch and don't think about it as control over my diagnosis, or control over when I'm gonna die, but think about having control over preserving what I value. And it's like, that's the control you have. I may not have control over my circumstances, but I can control over maintaining what I value, even all the way to the end. And so I think that's the control we want to realize. And you have to first identify what you value and then make that a priority, and then focus on how can I control keeping that in my life, even all the way to the end.
And it's also important to communicate too, like, let's suppose you're one of 3 siblings and your mother chose your oldest sister to be the medical power of attorney. It's sometimes important for the parent to talk to the children and say, it's not because I love Susie more than the rest of you. I'm choosing Susie as my medical power of attorney because I know that she will be able to execute my wishes and my priorities and values. And sometimes you need that reiteration, right? I'm assigning this individual not because I love them more, but because I know that they're going to jump into action when needed. And that sometimes opens the conversation of who is your medical power of attorney? Sometimes your husband or your wife isn't your best option because, as we're seeing with Dolores and Howard, I mean, they're having different opinions about how they want to do things. And so that's important to address and acknowledge that, hey, you know what? You are really emotional and I love you to death, but I know that if I'm telling you I don't want to be resuscitated, I think that you're going to say, no, do everything, save her life. And I just can't have that. So it's not that I don't love you. I love you. I chose you to be my husband. But I'm going to choose my best friend who happens to be the pit bull in our lives, who is going to advocate for my values and priorities and my wishes.
And again, to add to that, you may not want it to be a particular child either, because you don't want them to fight amongst themselves when it's over.
Yes.
And they're very upset and they're very angry at what you did, even though I did what mom said. So, I purposely chose someone who's not part of the family to be my medical power of attorney, so that when it's all over, they can just slip away. Nobody has to, make their life miserable because of the decisions they made for me. So I'm leaving them out completely so that they can just know that it's about honoring.
And that's important too, right? Is having your medical power of attorney understand that they're a reflection of your values and beliefs. It's not their values and beliefs. All of that gets left at the door. It's not about them in that situation. They're advocating for you. What does Andi want? Doesn't matter if I don't agree with her. I am advocating and representing her and speaking for her based on her decisions and values and priorities. But that's why we've had so many conversations, because I really want to get to know what it is that's important to Andi so that I can be the best advocate for her. And sometimes that is somebody who's not related, who can detach from the situation enough to be that strong advocate.
I was just chuckling to myself because dying seems like so much work.
Yeah. You thought you were done.
So much work.
So we only have about 5 more minutes. So do you want to see if there are any more pressing questions, or is there are there final thoughts that you wanted to share? Fine.
Some final.
I mean, Howard and Dee are getting anywhere because the kids are not listening and they are so intent in sending them to Boston that nothing is being done. They don't know, they don't want to go there, but they're not listening, and it gets louder and louder. And they hurry all the time. Oh, we have to go there. And so they are not listening to it.
So my sister and I had this conversation about time last week, because we talked about time last week. And then she was telling me, because she's doing some research for library sciences, that our sense of time changes as we get older.
Yeah.
So that when you're younger, you are more rushed and hurried. But as you get older, you take more time. You can, that's the only factoid I tell you about that. In different cultures. Yeah.
I want to share something because you brought up a really good point too. And sometimes it's really difficult to make a decision when other people are just so loud, when the other voices around you are so much louder than your own. And I just want to share a quick story of an individual that we worked with who he had already been on hospice care, but they had determined that he could do rehab for a little bit. And so he was very adamant that he didn't want to go through rehab. It was very painful for him. He didn't want to go through it. What really excited him was being in his community home on his sofa watching football. That is what he loved to do. That's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to do rehab. But his children kept saying very loudly, that voice got louder of, Dad, it's only 2 weeks. It's paid for, it's only 2 weeks. You could do rehab for 2 more weeks, and if it doesn't work, then that's okay. We don't need to try it again. And his voice got lower, and he eventually decided to, okay, let's do the 2 weeks of rehab. And, that's what my son is recommending, and I'll do it. He did the 2 weeks of rehab. He finally got back to his home, finally got on his sofa, turned on his football, and he only got to enjoy that for 1 more day before he died. So we think about, again, quality of life versus quantity of life and what is most important to you. And so that's why it's important to really evaluate and self-reflect on what is most important to you so that your voice is never diminished as you are making these choices on your life.
Does it get easier? So if you start the planning when you're younger and you regularly say, okay, what is my quality of life that I want at my end of life? Does it just get easier every year when you reevaluate it? Or is it always this really deep dive that you have to take time to focus on?
I think you can prepare and prepare and prepare, but when it happens to you, you're never fully prepared. Which is why it's good to have a support system to kind of catch you when you're falling. Because it is hard. Even though you're prepared when it's your mom, when it's your husband, your wife, your child, it's a whole different situation. But you're not alone, and there's really wonderful resources to help support you through that, so that you don't completely lose everything.
And when there is no family, when someone is alone, what happens?
That's where you need to make sure that you have a good advocate. So again, whether it's a friend or a neighbor that you trust, who could be your medical power of attorney. But again, having multiple conversations to make sure they align with you. And I have some handouts that I'm happy to share with all of you. In there, it's just some information, the health values worksheet, so that you guys can all have access to that. My email's on there, so if you have any questions after this, if you decide you want another copy of anything I gave you, reach out to me and I'm happy to send anything your way.
Thank you everyone for being here.
And be sure to join us next week at 4.